This is a German movie and the latest project from writer-director Christian Petzold, whose previous work I'm somewhat familiar with as I have seen 2 of his previous films. Phoenix, which I thought was very interesting and well made, and Transit, which was basically a remake of Casablanca, except not as good, so I didn't really care for it that much. Now this one I didn't know much about going into it, and I wasn't sure what the title even meant. But what I learned from the movie itself was that it's just the name of the protagonist, a woman called Undine. Except it's not just a name as it turns out, it also has apparently a deeper meaning. And the movie doesn't tell you this, it's just something you sort of have to know. And I only learned about it after looking into it, but apparently Undine are some sort of mythological water spirits. Which in hindsight I should have known, as I've seen the movie called Undine, spelled with an O, with Colin Farrell, and I actually liked that movie, but for some reason completely forgot it even existed. Now, why do I even bring this up? Does it really matter? Well, yeah, it sorta does. Because there are some, what I guess I would call light fantasy elements to this movie as well. There are some strange things that happen involving water. And knowing this background info might have made it a little bit easier to understand. Although the way it plays out in the movie, you never really know what's meant to be real and what's not. Are things happening just in the heads of the characters, or is it maybe just a metaphor? So at the end of the day, it doesn't really clarify much anyway, but I feel like it did bring a sense of understanding I didn't have before, knowing what Undine actually are. Now, with that out of the way, what is the movie even about? Well, it's about this woman who works as a historian in Berlin. She knows a thing or two about the history of the city itself, about the layout of it, the architecture, and how it's evolved over the centuries. But in the very first scene, her boyfriend leaves her, and let's just say she doesn't take it very well. From there on out, this goes in some strange and fascinating directions. In fact, I would call this a rather peculiar movie, for a number of reasons. The tone being one, the actual story being another, and those fantasy elements I mentioned certainly play a part too. But you know what? I kinda liked this one, and to large part because of how unique it felt. I've never seen a movie quite like it, and you know, it's essentially a love story of sorts. Except it takes an unusual approach and makes something quite different. And I have to say I really like the 2 central performances here too. The titular character played by Paula Beer and her love interest played by Franz Rogowski. And interestingly enough, those 2 played the leads in Transit 2, the director's previous film. So I guess these 3 really liked working together, and I think they did a very good job here too. Now, I have seen both of those actors in other things as well, and I expected nothing less from them. So no real surprise there, but yeah, regardless, I thought the chemistry here worked very well. Other than that, I'm not sure what else to say. I did notice a running theme here though, about things constantly breaking and shattering, but I'm not entirely sure what that meant. Did it symbolize heartbreak or what? I'm not sure, but it definitely was not accidental. I must also say that I actually enjoyed all that stuff about the city itself. I just found it to be fascinating, and I feel like I genuinely learned a thing or two. But I'm sure it was all meant to be a metaphor for life and love and all of that as well. And yeah, as I said, I quite like this one and its peculiar nature, so I'm feeling like it deserves something like a solid 7. Boop. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to just everyone, but if you like slightly odd movies, definitely check it out. Or you could just skip it as well, or do whatever you feel is right. After all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel, because that would be fantastic.